Hello, this is Joyce Graff. I'm with The Powerful Patient. I'm a patient advocate, and my son is blind, and my husband was blind. So I'm very interested in educating people who are visually impaired. I've been working with my good friend Sue Buckley in Knoxville, Tennessee. Hey, Sue.
Hey, Joyce. Glad to be here.
Great. Sue runs an organization called Club Vibes, which is an empowerment group for young people who are losing their vision or who are blind. And she's doing a fabulous job out there doing that. And we have with us a couple of special guests today, Campbell and her mother, Campbell and Rutherford, and they're from near Knoxville. What's the name of your town again?
Dandridge.
Dandridge, thank you. Welcome. And our special guest today is Denise Robinson. And Denise Robinson is from an organization called YourTechVision.com. So welcome, Denise.
Howdy. Actually, our company is called TechVision, but we made this for you, so it's Your TechVision on the website. I know, I was going to have to explain that one.
There is another organization by the name of TechVision.com, by the way, that snagged me the first time I put it in. So that's how I learned it was YourTechVision.com.
Right, because we made this for you and all you teachers and parents and families, yes.
Very good. So now what is exactly that your company does?
So let me tell you a little background, and that will lead you into why we do what we do. So I started out as a TDI due to my own eyes hemorrhaging. I never met a blind person before, but I had the most incredible instructors who taught me all the blind skills. And this was in the day when the Apple II and Echo boxes first came out. So you have to have a little age on you to know that. But the best technology in the world means nothing without instructors who understand it. And so I really learned that, and they gave me a passion for what technology would do for the blind eventually. Not even eventually, oh my gosh. They were learning it, they were teaching it to us. I just loved it. So I decided, I want to become a teacher of the blind. So when I became a teacher of the blind, oh my gosh, massive hours, because we didn't have paraeducators back then. We did everything. So I would, on a braille out all the lessons and the work for the students, as well as do all my lessons plans and teach the kids every single thing they needed to learn. Well, teaching them just a little Apple II GS with an Echo box was pretty simple back in the day. But as the technology grew and grew, you just ran out of hours during the day. So I finally convinced them to give me a touch typist who typed really well. And this day, they could type through the Mountbatten, and I could attach a screen so she could actually see what she was typing, which automatically translated it into grade 2 Braille. That was life-saving. Oh my gosh, that was like 4 or 5 hours off my day.
Yeah, let me back you up a minute. There's one acronym that I'm sure we're going to throw around quite a bit here, and that is a TVI. It's a teacher of the visually impaired, right? So
para-educators, yeah.
Right. And you mentioned a number of bits of technology, but it's not important to really know what all of those are. But I think the bottom line is technology is evolving at an enormous pace. And for any of us to keep up with the advances in technology is difficult for any one person to do that. And so your organization has been specializing specifically in that area. Is that correct?
That is correct, because TVIs, and any TVI will tell you this, they do not have time to sit down and learn all the technology and learn it like it needs to be taught. You have to be vested in it. You have to be doing it every single day. And so that's where I really noticed the shortfall is TVIs were just totally overwhelmed with everything they had to do. And I was already so vested in the technology. I did gain the majority of my sight back, still a lot of other visual issues, but I can see very well. But I love the technology. I'm also dyslexic. And so the audio feedback was just tremendous for me. And I discovered once you learn those keyboard commands, they're just faster than mouse. That's just the bottom line. And so I love a good challenge. Schools get a hold of me and say, how do you access this site? I love to problem solve websites, anything that people think is inaccessible. Most often you discover it's not at all. So that's what our company does, is we want to team with school districts and TDIs because technology is such a specialty. And the schools that we do this in, we team with the TDI. They do what they do best. We do the technology, and we just team. We're very, very close. And wow, it's very powerful for the student. And the student just flies and excels. And that is what the company does.
Great, thank you. So Liza and Campbell, maybe you all can give us some insights into how you discovered that you needed such a person as Denise and how you found her. First of all, we should say that Campbell has been homeschooled since what grade?
Fifth grade.
Since fifth grade. So Liza, you've been not only the parent, but also the teacher as this went along. And so you can relate to teachers are overwhelmed and they know all kinds of stuff. And then all of a sudden, COVID happens and everybody goes, oh, we're going to learn online now.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have any services from fifth grade till eighth grade. So essentially, she was my mom, my teacher, and my TDI for 4 years. So I think she understands. So I think it was back when I was in eighth grade, we went to the Tennessee School for the Blind for a tech evaluation. And that's when it was kind of brought to our attention that, I mean, I knew virtually nothing about the computer. I hadn't even ever turned one on at that point, I don't think. And so we looked into getting some training. But I was only going to be able to see an outreach person from Tennessee School for the Blind once a month. So we knew that that was not enough tech training, especially since I had always wanted to pursue a career in the STEM field. So we knew that I needed more. So we actually heard about Dr. Robinson and Tech Vision through my orientation and mobility instructor. He got me in touch with a guy who taught me a lot about the basics of the computer and maintenance on it and stuff like that. And he was very good in that area, but he didn't know a whole lot about the academic side of things. And so we negotiated with our school system for
About a year.
Well, 2 years actually, I think, in order to get them to pay for lessons with Dr. Robinson and Tech Vision, because we are still receiving services from the school system, even though we're homeschooled, because there are no Braille curricula in Braille homeschool curricula or anything like that. So last year, we finally got them to agree to pay for a few lessons with Dr. Robinson, and I got started, and I loved it, and I knew I was far behind, but I put myself to work, and I think I learned a whole lot, and so now I'm a student intern with Tech Vision, as well as just one of their students.
And it definitely took some persistence. I think we had 8 meetings with the director of special education that last 6 months before they did finally agree to pay for the first, how many lessons? 10?
Yeah, 10.
First 10 lessons with Denise. And then she said, we'll see how that goes and how much you improve and see if we can pay for more. And then they've added more on since then.
And the thing was, they had purchased me a Braille note taker, I guess right before my sophomore year of high school. And they had done that so that I would have something to output my math content on as I was learning to output it on the computer. But then in one of our meetings, the special ed director said, well, I'd kind of put all my stock in this Braille note taker. And so now it's failing to deliver. And so they didn't really know what to do at that point. And so, we eventually got them to pay for tech.
So the braille note taker is a specialized device that has a sort of computer in it. It has a certain amount of memory, and you write into it using only braille. Is that right?
It's sort of like a cross between a braille display, which is a braille keyboard that you connect to your computer, and an Android tablet. And it's kind of clunky and glitchy in some cases. It's fairly user friendly when it comes to, just learning the basics, but it definitely is nowhere near as powerful as a computer, and probably not even as powerful as your typical Android tablet, because it takes longer for updates to come and things like that.
So I think you were telling me before we started that a braille note taker is about a $5,000 device. And these days, that's a pretty expensive computer. So that what you would suggest was more like get a normal computer, a Windows computer, because that's what you're likely to encounter in the workplace.
Right.
And add a braille display. And I have a picture we can share with everybody so they can see what that would look like. So just an ordinary laptop, which you can get a pretty good laptop for about $2,000 these days. And then this braille display thing is about what, $500, $600 more?
No, those are about 25, 2,800.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But they also have a little note-taking device within it, which is much smaller, much more convenient, so it does a lot more than a note taker. And those note takers are like $55,000, $6,000. So instead of the schools paying for something like that, they could pay for the technology instruction.
So this braille, the braille device that we see in addition to the laptop is something you could just carry by itself and take notes?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, so that could function almost as a braille note taker, but then you plug it in and you can use it in combination with the laptop, right?
You don't even need to plug it in. That's run by Bluetooth. So that most of the kids use it by Bluetooth. You can plug it in also. Let's say the battery's dying and you still need it. You can plug it directly into the computer and keep it going.
So it's Bluetooth connected to the laptop or desktop computer, as the case may be.
Right.
Right. Okay. So is that more or less what you have, Campbell?
Yes, I'm planning on getting a Focus 40 for college, which is probably one of the best braille displays out there. But right now I have one that I have connected to my computer via USB, and it served me pretty well.
Yep.
I'm looking at exactly that picture right now, like our setup. We're using Campbell's laptop and her braille display. So when you brought the picture up the first time, I was like, is she got like a camera in our situation?
Oh yeah, that's like the kids' basic setup. Yeah, you name it. That's the basic setup for the kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's something that's going to grow with you. So if you need to get a new computer, you don't necessarily need to get a new braille display because it's a Bluetooth connection to a different device. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Joyce, I'd like to put a little caveat in here.
Sure.
You know, and most of the parents are probably going to say this. When COVID hit and everybody went virtual, our students did not miss a beat because they had already known all the technology, already used it. It was nothing. It was not even a bump in the road. It was just like every day. And our kids immediately were able to connect up even easier than a lot of the sighted kids, because the sighted kids had to figure out how to do it with a mouse. Our kids didn't. They were all ready to go. And it's not typical. Our blind kids are ahead of the sighted kids. And that was probably the coolest thing about what the kids had already learned, is it was just smooth as silk, the transition. It was no big deal.
I can testify to that too. One of my best friends, we have daughters about the same age, and her sighted daughter has always used a Mac, and because she's an artsy girl and she's trying to do her first online college classes. She didn't expect it to be online. It's her freshman year of college, and she's having to learn all this, and it's overwhelming because she's never done any of this before. And because Campbell's been working with Tech Vision for a year now, she's taking her first college class with no bumps so far.
Right. Everything's gone really well.
Yeah.
Great. You mentioned some issues with mathematics because typing equations and things like that there is a way to do that in Braille, but I can imagine that using a screen reader to navigate through that is very challenging.
Yes, and in order to actually output math content on the computer in an accessible format, you have to use a code called LaTeX. I think you can also use a code called Unicode, but I haven't used that very much. I use LaTeX because it's typically used for advanced math, I think. And so you have to be able to learn that code, which it isn't particularly hard, but most TVIs do not know it. So you have to be able to learn that code in order to be able to output your advanced math content. And reading
if I were a scientist and I'm writing a paper and it's got these convoluted equations in it, I would use LaTeX to put that out even in print?
Yes, I think so.
Yes. I'll help you, Campbell. Yes, that's exactly what you do. And it looks exactly like a sighted person would do it. The graphical spatial layouts, LaTeX does exactly that. We've got a video on it on our YouTube. And you can do, Campbell mentioned Unicode, but she was all Nemeth code up until she started learning LaTeX. But you can do all the way up to Algebra 2 using the Unicodes and outputting all your math in Word. All our kids output all their math in Word. They do not do it out on a brailler and then have to have someone transcribe it. So they have their Braille books, of course, under their fingers, the Nemeth under their fingers, and then they output it in Word. And then Campbell is correct. LaTeX is for the advanced math past Algebra 2. You need something like that.
So just so everybody is on the same page, the Nemeth code is the special code that's used in Braille to depict mathematics, various kinds of algorithms and so forth. And as you said, the spatial concepts in particular were difficult to do with the regular screen readers. A screen reader is a piece of software that helps you navigate through a visual screen. Close your eyes and try to figure out where they put the silly button. Everything's very visual these days, so the screen reader helps you to navigate, find the next button or find the next paragraph and so forth.
Hey, Joyce, I just might want to mention that when we're talking about this at this level, this is exactly brings us back to kind of the beginning of the podcast when we were saying that there's no way TVIs are going to be able to learn all the adaptive technology in addition to all their other responsibilities when you're getting to this level of advanced. This is like having your PhD, and it's something regarding, for the high advanced math. I don't believe a TVI can specialize at that level. And with, say one student they would have in their caseload. This would be where a service knowing about LaTeX or even that how to use it, let alone know it exists, I think that would be where you would look for a specialist outside of your school district, like Dr. Denise Robinson, where you have that for your student when they get past what you as a TVI can teach them, your knowledge level, so that you just don't hesitate or stunt their next skill level for their schooling and their education or their future, but push them into that next level of training. And I know a lot of TVIs who do not know, I will say this, that LaTeX even exists currently.
Yeah. I better give you the other pronunciation of it. People usually call it latex. And as soon as I say that, everybody's going, oh yeah, I've heard of latex. It's actually pronounced LaTeX, just in case, yeah.
How do you spell that?
Good idea, yeah.
Capital L, small a, capital T, small EX.
Oh, it is? Okay.
We're talking about teachers of the visually impaired, but so many parents now have become the teachers for their children since COVID, even if they weren't already doing it before, as Liza has been. So, and parents are having to struggle with all the algebra and such, you know, how much do they remember from their own schooling? So every parent and every teacher is going to have some holes in their own knowledge that we want them to know that there are people out there who can help fill those holes.
Yes.
Great. So, Denise, you were telling me that your YouTube channel also has a number of videos that could be helpful for parents at home.
Yeah, I think we're reaching about 600 all lesson videos. They're the students. A lot of them are just recording the students as we take them through all the keyboard commands to do actual lessons. That's what we do. We teach actual, if they're all applicable, we don't come in with our own design of what we are going to teach. This student says, oh, I need to do a PowerPoint. Teach me how to do that today. Or an XY line plot graph. Teach me Excel. So we're always teaching exactly what the student needs. And so they're learning in real time. And that really increases the learning level exceptionally fast. Now, Campbell's kind of what we call an Einstein kid. So she definitely learned faster than most kids in 1 year. It usually takes kids a little bit faster than that. But it's hence the reason why she became one of our teacher interns. Yeah, so, yep.
I will, Joyce, I will say that I have visited the Your Tech Vision YouTube channel. And I want to say that sometimes when you first log on, you're like, wow, look at these kids. I mean, what it does is not only instruct, but it educates the public on what blind and visually impaired are capable of. You see these kids doing this and you're like at warp speed sometimes. You have to stop, rewind, go back. Even as a blind user of a computer that I think I'm, you know, at least intermediate level, I'm somewhat sometimes taken back like, wow, I want to learn that. So I go through the lesson and slow it down for me and repeat it for me. And then I'm like, wow, I want to try to keep up with Campbell, which, by the way, I'll say has been impossible with some of the YouTube channel stuff. So I want to give kudos to both Campbell, a student intern, Liza for being the parent who's found all these resources, including Dr. Denise. You know, it's wonderful to see all this wraparound team building, as I guess I would say, for IEP work.
The bottom line is, though, I so want to emphasize this. Our kids can do anything and everything every other student is doing. There's no reason for the special accommodation of lessening the workload or giving more extensive time. If these kids started at 3 years old doing all these pre-skills like all the sighted kids and entered kindergarten knowing the keyboard and all their braille, at least the alphabet, so they can start learning the contractions, our kids can stay on grade level throughout school. There is no reason why they have to be behind, and not just keep up with the peers, but kids like Campbell, oh my gosh, she would have been the valedictorian. She would have been at the top of her class. Her brain, and that's the way our kids can output their brain level. And then you can really see how brilliant they are. But there is no reason why they have to be behind. And if they have a computer and they have a braille display, so the braille's under their fingers, and a screen reader, there is nothing these kids can't do. They can do everything. Yeah, and Campbell's just one small testament to that. And like you said, Sue, you go to the YouTube channel, you're going to see hundreds of kids doing all the same things everybody else is doing. And this is what everybody else should be doing. All our kids should be doing this. Yeah.
Great. Great. Thank you.
I'll say as a parent, I know I talk to a lot of other parents who come to me later and say, I had no idea my child was behind. They make all A's. They make all A's in school. But I had no idea that there was a sighted teacher's aide doing everything for this student. And they're doing all their math orally and all of their work orally. So they're functionally illiterate in middle school because no one has followed up. The school system just sometimes wants to push kids through and make sure they're learning the academic material without being sure that they can do these other things to produce work independently. And as we've worked with our school system, the first thing they wanted to do, we talked about Campbell going back to public school, was to give her a teacher's aide all day long at school as a junior. And I'm like, she doesn't need a teacher's aide all day long as a junior in high school. I mean, she's not going to have that in college. She's not going to have that in the job market. Who's going to hire someone who has to have an assistant all the time?
Right.
So it took me forever to get that point across to people and I don't understand their logic either, because it costs a whole lot more to employ a teacher's aide than it would to pay for these tech lessons.
Right.
So it really didn't make much sense to me, but I think that's all they know. It's ignorance. You know, they don't understand that, hey, these kids can do this work independently.
Yeah.
This isn't just with blindness. We've seen it with other disabilities as well. It's kind of across the board, I think.
Yeah.
And even with kids who maybe don't have disabilities but are struggling in school, they kind of just get pushed through instead of actually getting the help that they need, which is a huge issue, I think.
Right. See, you've made this point before that blind students and other disabled students should be learning the same things, the same skills that their sighted peers are learning at the same age.
Yeah, the pace should be at the same level. So if a second grader is doing keyboarding and working on a computer, then the second grader's blind visually impaired should have already should have had the hands on the keyboard and not even know what a computer is, or like Campbell was saying, how old she was before she learned that she would even turn it on. So she's fast at catching up, but the competition in the market for employment, the unemployment rate for disabled but blind and visually impaired is phenomenally high. They've quoted figures well above 70%. Well, I think we are hitting it on the head of why. If we literally quote handicap someone because we're not giving them the skills they need for employment when they're 30 or younger, we're not doing them a favor. Giving them an assistant, like Liza was saying, they're not going to have that when they're 30 years old if they're able to get a job, because as an employer, you're not going to want to hire somebody who's going to have a co-person walking around with them. You feel like you're wasting money in your budget. So, it makes sense to think that the money spent needs to be now when they're young, and to get them up to equal, and to be honest, better than their peers to get the job, better than their peers in technology, so that they can be equipped to write papers, to write whatever job. I mean, I can't think of hardly a job, especially administrative job, that blind and visually impaired would be very good at using their brains, that doesn't take the use of writing skills and computer skills, technology, emailing, searching the internet, researching. You got to go to college to do these things. All the skills it takes to just get through college. If you're passing somebody along and letting a peer do it, or a buddy, or a teacher assist, that's not giving them the tools they need themselves. So I'm a big advocate for tools themselves. They need to be, taught those things.
Campbell?
I think the fact is, as blind and visually impaired individuals, we have to work, I'd say, at least twice as hard as our sighted peers, if not harder, to kind of exceed the low expectations that people have for blind people. And I mean, you can say it's not fair all you want, but it doesn't necessarily change the reality of it. So if a kid is not even performing up to the same level as their sighted peers, then there's no way they're going to be able to exceed the expectations of their future employers, or even their college professors. Mm-hmm. So we have to make a lot of effort to succeed, and being able to succeed in technology is a huge part of that.
Ultimately, we just have to do more than just getting by. And Campbell academically in public school did great. I mean, like she scored well on all the state tests and all that stuff, but she wasn't doing those things independently. She was requiring another human to help her complete the homework, the exams, whatever. None of it was done her work only. She was academically contributing. She was answering the questions, but someone else was having to do the work as far as putting it on paper for her. So I think that's where the gap is. They think, oh, this child is so bright and so smart and so academically advanced, but that's not going to do her any good if she can't show her work to someone. So I think that's where the gap is in the schools.
Right. And I think you're exactly right that when you go to apply for a job, in the mind of the recruiter is usually a prejudice that sounds sort of like, if I were blind, I don't think I could do it. And that, of course, is not the question, but it is the prejudice. It's the starting point from where they come. And you have to prove yourself every day that you can do it. And Liza, you mentioned an important thing. You said they're not literate. And you're right that if they're doing everything orally, they don't know how to write, what the grammar is, how to spell things. And Braille helps do that. If you're a young person doing that in Braille, my husband didn't go blind till he was in his 20s, and so he never did learn much more Braille than just to label things. But of course, he had writing skills at that point. But computers give you access to all of that now. And so being able to do that on a computer and or with Braille makes a very big difference. You can write a report, you can write a presentation, and all of that is very critically important when you go for a job.
Joyce, I will mention, you mentioned Braille. Sometimes people think, and parents have been told, that either they need Braille or a computer, and it's not one or the other. Because Braille, when they're young, Braille is their alphabet. That's their literacy. That's what blind and visually impaired learn to be able to do the things on the computer. You have to know Braille to start out in the academic track. You mentioned your husband later in life losing sight, which is what I did. Because I wasn't going to be going through college and needing to take an algebra, thank goodness, or calculus class, sighted, let alone blind, learning Nemeth code and everything that goes along with that. But if I hadn't, known, I did the same thing your husband did, learning Braille for labeling. And I am a huge advocate of Braille, but I'm a huge advocate of the computer also. And some people think it's one or the other. I hear that all the time. Like, it's not one or the other. This is your toolkit, and you need both in it.
Well, it's not just that. If you don't know the computer, you've just pretty much exited yourself out of the majority of jobs in the world.
Correct.
That's the big thing. It's, you need to learn Braille, but just Braille will not get you a job. You have to know the computer. And we have a lot of kids that have lost sight after school, and they lost it in college. And you know what? Their first priority is not Braille, because they already do have a literacy system. It's learning the computer. Yeah. The Braille will come, but the first priority, because the computer immediately gets them back into school. So it's not just maybe they should. No, it's a must. If you want to join the world, you need to learn the computer. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And we should probably do a whole show another time on smartphones too, because
with a smartphone.
Right. The whole area of computers has changed so much in the last even 5 years, much less 10 or 20 years, that not everybody my age realizes the power of the computer and the smartphone. My son does, he can, with his smartphone, he can check what's the denomination of the bill that I was just handed in change. That was a very big one because people sometimes will try to cheat blind people by handing them a 5 instead of a 20. You know, so you can actually check that with your smartphone. And there are so many other apps now on smartphones, everything from reading the cereal box label to, you know, telling what's in this can, which used to be an enormous challenge. So there's a tremendous amount that blind people can do now, and blindness is still a major annoyance, but it certainly doesn't have to be a job exclusion thing as long as we take good advantage of the technology.
I would say, Joyce, also that parents need to learn to take some use of the technology to Google, to research probably some of the things Liza did when Campbell's in 4th, 5th grade, finding out all the things that are out there now for the parents and the TVIs nationally. The resources have exploded since COVID. They've been there, but a lot of it has been not as hands-on, literally. It sounds silly to say that, but through your computer, there's so much that you can find out that your child may or may not be behind on, maybe advanced on. What's the next thing that's out there that TVIs are teaching this particular grade in California or Texas? There's Facebook groups. There's so much information sharing of resources that I say, I challenge the parents also, start looking at that for their young child that's blind, visually impaired. You know, don't hesitate to ever quit learning yourself, and then introduce the child, because once the child learns the computer, they want to research that information themselves.
Great. Any other final words that we want to leave with our listeners this morning?
I would just, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Campbell.
You mentioned blindness being a major annoyance, but I think when it comes to learning this technology, if the blind students get all of the training that they need and can keep up with their sighted peers and even exceed even kind of go beyond what their sighted peers are doing, then I think it can sometimes become sort of a gift too, because we definitely are more aware of the keyboard commands and things like that. A lot of them are usable for, you know, sighted people with just Windows and Office and stuff like that. But we're kind of, you know, we're a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to that. And there are other skills that we pick up along the way, and, you know, perseverance and things like that, in order to, you know, exceed the expectations of our sighted peers that ultimately benefit us, I think.
I would say in Club Vibes, I've seen some of the students, they're blind, visually impaired, be telling some of their sighted parents, friends of parents, oh yeah, this is how you do that, because we use it every day. And they do know the shortcut keys, or they've learned a piece of technology like the Zoom platform or others, much more in depth than their sighted peers. So you're right, it can be a gift of technology expertise if they're able to embrace that and taught that at a young enough age as they go forward.
Great. And Denise?
I was just going to say, the best piece of technology in the world will not do you any good if you don't have an instructor who can actually teach you how to utilize it. And then you do, and that kid will learn everything. And Campbell's right. It's not a hindrance. Oh my gosh, they will fly, and they will be able to help their sighted peers. And that's another thing. Our kids help their sighted peers because our kids know the computer. They're going to our kids, which increases a huge social aspect, because the sighted kids go to our kids for help. So another huge thing, where they were isolated all the time, that's not the way it is. You know the technology, you're going to have everyone coming to you for help.
Good.
Great. Well, thank you all. This has been a great conversation, and we'll put it out there and ask other people for feedback and continue the conversation on related topics in the future. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody, and be a powerful patient.